So I would just like to take this opportunity to pay my respects to Jalkun Mahasamai and all my fellow practitioners, the Sangha. And I would also like to greet you all, my friends in the Dhamma, that have all come here to Dhamma. All of you have come here to practice the Dhamma, to develop what we call panya, which is wisdom. Wisdom within the Buddha Sasana, this isn't the normal kind of wisdom that you find in the world. This is the wisdom that will take the mind beyond suffering. Even in this life, there's all different kinds of wisdom that we can acquire and that we can chase after. So, for example, when one goes to school, when one is a child, one will go to school and seek knowledge in different subjects of school. We keep doing this throughout our lives, and we get to the point where we realize we need to have a job. So we start to acquire skills, we start to acquire wisdom to be able to work at a particular job. We do this because we realize that we need the four basic requisites for living in the world, which are food, clothing, shelter, and medicine. Every one of us needs these things. So we have to go out and we have to find some sort of job, some sort of occupation. But this occupation we have to find, it has to be what's called it's like a right job, a right kind of job that doesn't hurt anyone else or doesn't hurt ourselves. This is one kind of wisdom, but it's a worldly kind of wisdom, and this is not the kind of wisdom that will take us out of suffering. Suffering is something that's always in the mind, and so what we have to do is we have to practice, we have to develop the kind of wisdom in the Buddha Sasana, and this is what will take our mind beyond suffering. The Buddha was someone who had the highest kind of wisdom in his mind. Before he became enlightened and before he became the Buddha, he developed very, very deep states of concentration, what are called the jhanas. He developed what's called the rupa jhana, which is the form jhana, very deep states of meditation, all the way up to what's called the arupa jhanas, which is the formless meditations. These are very, very deep, very refined kinds of concentration, and it's also a very, very refined kind of happiness. But even though he developed concentration up to that very deep level, he realized his mind still hadn't been released from suffering. All it was actually doing was temporarily suppressing the defilements in his mind. It can be compared to if there was a field of grass or there was a patch of grass, and one took a rock and put the rock on a specific area of the grass. If you left that rock there for a period of time, what would happen? The grass underneath would become withered. But then, in time, if you took the rock away, the roots of that grass are still healthy. So as soon as that grass gets water and it gets sun on it, it'll start to grow again. So this is exactly what happens when one develops deep concentration and they don't develop wisdom. Their mind, it will seem like their mind has got no more defilements in it, but really they've just temporarily suppressed the defilements for a certain period of time. So this kind of samadhi, it's still good, it's still important, but if you don't use the power of this samadhi to investigate, you'll never actually be able to be free from suffering. So the Buddha, further on in his quest, on the night of his enlightenment, he sat down and he investigated that this samadhi wasn't something that would take him, these kind of formless samadhis, this wasn't something that was going to take him all the way to enlightenment. But he reflected back to the time when he was only 7 years old, and it was a royal ploughing festival, and he sat under an apple tree and he watched the in and out breath, and his mind entered what's called the first jhana, the first form jhana. And so he realized that this was the right path. This was the right path. This is what would lead him to enlightenment. So he did this again, and he developed this kind of meditation. And later on, the three knowledges arose in his mind, which are the knowledge of his previous lives, the knowledge of being's birth and being's deaths, And then he realized the final kind of knowledge, the kind of knowledge that freed his mind from all the defilements in the mind. He saw that avijja, tanha, and upatana, which is ignorance, craving, and clinging, these were the root causes of all the suffering that was in his mind. These three aspects were the cause of all birth and all becoming and all suffering. He investigated over these. He investigated that sankhara is the cause. All sankharas is the cause for ignorance, and he investigated what's called the dependent origination, back and forth and back and forth. But this wisdom that he had attained, this isn't something that was just superficial. This wasn't just something he was thinking of and he was bringing from memory. This was real wisdom that was arising within his mind. So he took this wisdom and he cut the defilements off in his mind. And when he'd learned to do that, that's when he had cut those defilements off. That's when he attained full enlightenment. And so after that, after he realized the path and realized that this was the way to cut off all defilement in the mind, he took this path and he taught it. First, he taught it to the 5 ascetics, especially after his first sermon. A monk called Anyakonanda, he was the first one to break through to the Dhamma. But what you have to realize, Anyakonanda already had sought the Dhamma for a long time. He'd practiced the Dhamma for a long time, and he had a very calm mind already. So when the Buddha taught to him, his mind was ripe to see the Dhamma. And when the Buddha taught his first sermon to him, Anyakonanda saw that everything that arises passes away. And he broke through to the first level, what we call a sotapanna, just seeing that everything arises, passes away, and he knows that in his mind. While he was listening to the Buddha, he firmly kept his mind on the teachings until he saw this arising. He saw that everything, whether it's what's called rupa or nama, which is mind or matter, he saw everything inside and outside. Whatever it was trees, hills, things that had consciousness, things that don't have consciousness, like animals that have consciousness, and all other different sort of things. He saw that everything in the world arises and passes away. These are just causes and conditions according to nature. These are things going through the natural process. He saw that all these different things, everything inside and outside, there was no self in any of these. There was no me, there was no mine, there was no I in any of these, in any of this phenomenon. And this was wisdom arising in Anyakonanda, because he saw the Dhamma, he saw the truth. And when the Buddha had finished teaching and the Buddha had realized that Anyakonanda had seen the Dhamma, the Buddha exclaimed, Anyakonanda knows already, Anyakonanda knows. He got rid of what are called the first 3 fetters, and he became a sotapanna, the first 3 fetters, which is attachment to rites and rituals, self-identity view. So if we practice, we still have a lot of suffering within our mind, but this is the reason we have to practice, because we have this suffering here. Samadhi and developing concentrated states of mind are very, very important. So when we do develop this samadhi, the mind becomes firm and it becomes very stable. And so what we do, we use this firm and stable mind to investigate into the Dhamma. And once we have this firm and stable mind and investigating into the Dhamma, we'll clearly see the Dhamma, just like Anyakonanda did. So now that the Buddha has actually taught the Dhamma, and there have been people in history that have woken to the Dhamma that he's taught, this just goes to show for us there is hope. There is hope that this same wisdom will arise within our own mind, and we have hope that one day we'll be able to be rid of all the defilements within our mind. The best way to see this, and the best way to see this Dhamma, and the best way for wisdom to arise, is for us to always be constantly investigating the 3 truths of anicca, dukkha, anatta, which impermanence, suffering, and not self. If we use this as a constant reminder for ourselves, this will eventually give rise to real wisdom. You need to investigate all the things around you, all the things outside, whether they be things simply as cars, trees, other people, all the different things in the world. If you investigate these 3 truths, you'll see that all these different things in the world have the same characteristics. They just have the characteristics of changing. They're simply arising and passing away. Everything in life and everything in this world is in a constant state of change. On a very gross level, you could say, you can see change in some of the natural disasters that are happening around the world at the moment. The cause of these natural disasters is change in the world. There's no balance in the world, so that's what causes these massive tidal waves and the earthquakes and all these sort of things. But on the other side of it, there's all the very, very small little changes that maybe we can't even see at this point in time. So there's change on every kinds of level, but the main point is everything's in a state of flux, everything's in a constant state of change. So we have to investigate everything as not having a self, and not having, and that everything is just changing, and that there's no me or there's no self in any of these things. What all is happening is these are formations just arising, and the formation is just in a constant state of flux. They just arise and pass away. For example, our body is what we call a sankhara. It's something that's conditioned. It's something that's formed. It's something that simply came into the world. It was born into the world. It was born from elements. It was born. It gradually grew up. It continues to keep growing at every second of the day, and it keeps continuing onto old age, sickness, and death. It never stops. It never rests. It's always going through a state of change. So you have to ask yourself, how old are you now? Whatever age you are, do you know many people that are over 100 years old? You can see that there's not too many people in the world that's over 100. So just say if you're 50 now, it's like, at the most you've got 50 years left in your life before you have to die. Really look at this and really try to investigate these different kinds of things. And when you do this with a calm mind, you'll see that everything, both within and without, it's all just impermanent suffering and not self. You'll see that everything in the world that we take as our self it's simply just it's all a matter of conventions. It's simply conventional reality. There's no self in any of these things. And when one does actually understand this, and when one sees this and gets a glimpse of this, the mind becomes very bright and very radiant. This arising of wisdom and this radiant mind, this can happen at any point in time. This could actually happen even right now, while you're sitting here listening to the Dhamma. You could see into the nature of all things that everything is non-self. There's nothing in this world that is self and has any sort of self. It's all in a constant state of change. What you have to realize, though, is there are two kinds of wisdom. The first kind is a wisdom that arises from simply thinking over things and remembering things. So you can remind yourself that, this body's not self. Everything around me is not self. Everything inside and outside is not self. You can keep reminding yourself that the body is just made up of 4 elements. You can go through the body and think over different parts of it. The hard parts of the body, like the bones, that's the earth element. The liquid parts of the body, which is like the blood, that's just the water element. The heat element is the different kinds of heats and the different kinds of warmths in the body, and things like the breath going in and out. That's the air element in the body. You can all these things gather together and they make up what we call this body. So on an intellectual level, you can understand this and you can think over this. And this is good. This brings understanding to one level. And at the start, you do have to think like this and you have to investigate like this. But this is not the deeper kind of wisdom arising. This is just on the first level. In time, if you do this over a long period of time, one day you'll have a breakthrough and you really understand clearly. And this won't be wisdom that's just coming from your thinking mind. This will be real wisdom. This will be understanding clearly. And this is the other kind of wisdom that I was talking about. It's called Pawanamaya Panya. In time, when this kind of wisdom arises, you won't even need to think. You won't even need to use the thinking mind. Just a knowing will arise. The knowing will arise that all things inside and out, they're simply conventions. This is not the intellectual mind speaking to you. This is a real knowledge that arises within the heart. Just for example, like this hall here, like the Bodhikusuma, you can see everything within it, like the chairs, all the people here, all the women, men, all the different things around you. You can call that a chair, but in English we call it a chair. In Thai we call it something else. In Malaysian we call it something else. All these are just conventions. You'll see that all of these have no inherent meaning. We have to use language. We do have to use these conventions to get for a general understanding of if we need to call someone their name, and we do actually need these kinds of conventions. But in reality, on the deeper sense of it, they're simply conventions. They're just names that we've given to things. They're actually just a bunch of elements gathering together, arising for a period of time, and then passing away. Once you can understand this on the deeper level, you'll see that they're just simply a part of nature, and they have no self within them. For example, when I was still a layperson like you, I had the opportunity to go and listen to the Dhamma at one stage. At that time, I'd been meditating for quite a while. There was a monk, and he gave a talk, and he gave the examples that Ajahn Chah had given in one of his previous talks about the example of the three glasses. So just say, for example, you have a glass that's 5 inches tall. You might look at that and you say, "Oh, that's a reasonably big glass." But then if someone else brings out a glass that's like 7 inches tall, it's like, well, that new glass is bigger than the old glass. So the original glass becomes small now, and the new glass becomes big. And then someone might bring another glass out that's 9 inches, and it's like, well, that's the big glass, and this first glass now was the small glass. So in reality, either of the glasses are big or small or medium size. It's just the names and the labels that we attach to these, and the way we see the world. And I saw that. I saw through those conventions, and my mind deeply understood at that point in time. My mind became very bright. And what we could say, that real wisdom arose in my mind at that point in time. After that, I looked at everything, and everything I just saw everything as conventions. Nothing seemed to have any inner core. I saw at that point in time that the Dhamma that the Buddha taught, this was the truth, and this was beyond all conventions. What's called the Vipassana Jnana arose, which is the knowledge of wisdom, and the true faith in the Buddha's teaching, that arose at that point in time. I experienced so much rapture at that point because I saw a truth that I'd never saw and that I never thought was possible, and this was the arising of real wisdom. So for us now, we might be sitting here and it's like, well, why isn't this arising for me now? This is something you can't really control at this point in time. All you have to do is continually practice, and not worry about the results. One day it will arise if you practice in the right way and you keep continuing to practice. You can just look at your own body right here, right now. You can see your body's never said to you, it's like that this is my body, or this is your body. This never actually stated this. It's never said that, these nails, the nails have never said, these are my nails, or your hair's never said, it's your hair, or this skin. None of these things have ever said that they're yours, or all the different things, parts of the body. None of them ever actually say that they have an owner and they belong to you. When the mind is calm, you'll actually see this as like that these things are just arising according to nature and according to conditions. All the elements in our body, all the elements, the atoms, all these different parts of the body, they've never said that they're a self. The real problem is that we take this body as a self. So really develop yourself in morality. Keep the 5 precepts very good, and just steadily practice and just keep meditating, and one day you will see this truth. So therefore, please understand, all of us here, what we're doing right here at this present point in time, we're all developing wisdom within our minds. At the start of the practice, and right now, maybe this wisdom isn't clear and isn't the clear wisdom that I've been talking about here. But we do have wisdom to one level. We already can see that keeping morality and keeping our precepts, that this is a good thing. and that abstaining from doing anything bad and hurting other people and not keeping our precepts, that this is not a good thing. We can already see things like doing charitable giving and doing acts of generosity, that these are good things, but things like being selfish and stingy, these are bad things. So this is a form of wisdom. So don't feel discouraged that this wisdom hasn't arisen, because obviously it already has arisen within you. You can just look at your present situation, the present situation now. It's like all of you have come here tonight to practice the Dhamma. You're all here practicing meditation. You're already practicing mindfulness. Take a look outside. There's all these people out there in the world, and they're not doing this at all. They're out trying to have fun in all the different kinds of ways. But what they don't realize is that this fun that they're trying to have and this happiness they're trying to seek is impermanent, and one day it will leave them. But you already see this already. You see the benefit of developing in the Dhamma. So what we need to do is constantly keep practicing and making our mind a lot more calmer. The more calm our mind is, the more we'll see the suffering in this life, and the more wisdom we will give rise to. Once we do arrive at this wisdom, once this wisdom starts to develop within our own hearts, this is what we'll call sammaditthi, which is right view. You'll see that our lives it's simply a process of birth, old age, sickness and death. You'll see that all these things are simply suffering, separation from those we love, association with things we don't like. All these different aspects of our lives, whether they're large or small, they are all a cause of suffering. You can look right at your mind right now. Sometimes it thinks bad things, and it thinks in an unwholesome way, and that causes you suffering. But then on the other side of it, if you start to think like all these good, wholesome thoughts, it's like you become elated and you become joyous. But when that happiness in your mind leaves, when that happiness in your mind goes away, that's another cause of your suffering. So what you have to see is that both happiness and suffering are really the causes of suffering. But if you can bring the mind to the middle, and just keep it in a calm and quiet state, you'll see that all the movements of the mind, all the things that arise in our mind, these are something that aren't sure. Everything that's good that arises in the mind, it's not sure. Everything bad that arises in the mind, it's not sure. These things aren't permanent, they're just arising and passing away. This is something that Ajahn Chah really emphasized in his teachings. He said, if you like something, just always investigate it, that it's not sure, it's not permanent. If you dislike something, it's not sure, it's not permanent. If you see someone that you love and liking arises, just see that as something that's not sure. Or you see someone and you hate them, this is not sure. All these things can change. Maybe there was someone in the past that you really disliked, but now you like them. So all these feelings that arise in the mind, they're not permanent, they're not for sure. This is something you really have to keep on top of the mind and keep teaching the mind. Keep teaching the mind, and just bring this, you can bring this phrase up over and over again, that this is not sure, this is not sure. Don't cling to all these things, because none of these emotions and these feelings that I'm feeling, none of them are for sure. And if the more you do this, the more the mind will have wisdom. And it will see that all the things we love in the world, all the things we hate in the world, everything, all of them will simply change. And if we have wisdom, when this change occurs, there will be no more suffering in the mind. Another example Ajahn Chah would give is just say if we get something new, we get a new car, we get something new that we really, really like, we become very, very happy. But then in time, as that new thing that we once loved so much changes, it starts to change and it starts to degenerate. Maybe we crash the car or something. We suffer now because we're attached to that material object. So you really have to teach yourself. This is something that's really important, that everything that you gain in the world, it's simply impermanent. And when you do acquire these material goods, if you are teaching yourself in this way, that they're unsure, that they're impermanent, when they do change, you won't have suffering anymore. You'll just see it as something arising and passing according to nature. Even as you sit here at the moment, old age, sickness, and death, it's following us at in every second. Every second. This is something we can't control. This is something we can't do anything about. So what we have to do is develop wisdom, and just to see that this is a natural process. And the more wisdom we have in this area, the less suffering will arise in our mind when these things do come to fruition. So if the mind's in a good state or it's not in a good state, if you have wisdom, you'll be able to let both of these aspects of good and bad go. You'll be able to let go attachment to both good and bad within the mind, and the good thoughts, the wholesome thoughts and unwholesome thoughts in the mind. And if you can do that, this is where you'll really be free from suffering. So to get to this place of no suffering, what we all really have to do is follow the Noble Eightfold Path, the path of morality, concentration, and wisdom. This is the path that will cure all ignorance, attachment, and clinging within the mind. This will cure it and make it be rid of it forever. When you cure ignorance, craving, and attachment, when you cure this, you cure it in the present. You cure it right now within the mind. It's not something you do it in a far off, distant time. All these different things, all these wholesome and unwholesome dharmas, all the liking and disliking, they all arise right here in the present, and they all pass away in the present. All these things arise in the mind and pass away in the mind. So once we develop this Eightfold Path to its fruition, we'll be able to see the Dhamma right here in the present. You have to be quite careful though, careful with all what we call the sense impingements, all the things we come in contact with through our eyes, ears, nose, tongue and body. Because what happens when we do come in contact with these different experiences, they cause either pleasure or pain. And what happens with that, it causes what's called the Dhamma aramanas. And these are the things that really cause suffering, because they either like what they see at the eyes, or they don't like it. But what you have to keep teaching yourself, and you have to keep reminding yourself that these things aren't sure. These things are they're coming into contact. Just for example, like an eye sees a form, it comes into contact with it, and it passes away. Then the form's not there anymore, and the sight's not there anymore. So all these different things are just experiences arising and passing away, arising and passing away. And anything you don't like, you see these things and you don't like them. Well, they're the same thing. They're just arising and passing away. You have to really watch out for the defilements, because what they'll try to do is they'll try to trick you, and they'll try to stop you from developing in the Dhamma. They'll tell you things like, no, don't meditate now, you don't have to do any chanting today, you're tired. Or they'll give you all these different excuses. But what's really happening within your own mind here is the defilements that are in your mind. They're scared. Because they're scared, they don't want you to be rid of them. They don't want you to see the Dhamma. They want, they're quite happy and they're comfortable here in your mind. But you have to be patient. You have to really teach yourself, and you really have to outsmart those defilements within your mind. Teach yourself constantly remind yourself, constantly keep yourself mindful. And the more you can do this, and the more you can see the arising and passing away in your own mind, more and more wisdom will grow, and that'll be the cause for you to finally beat these defilements in your mind. So you really have to develop concentrated states of mind, and you can actually do this by using wisdom, the wisdom of the thinking mind. And when you can do that over and over again, and maybe investigate some sort of Dhamma theme, and when the mind does eventually become calm, and your mindfulness will be there right on top of it, and it'll know when the mind moves, and wisdom will be there because you've done this so much, and you've done this over and over, and you've practiced this so many times. When the mind does move, it will just be like a light going off, and you'll be able to see the impermanence of the mind, and at that point you'll be able to let go. You'll be able to let go completely. This is, once again, is Bhavanamaya Panya, and this is the wisdom that arose within the Buddha when he attained enlightenment. But what you have to remember is, in your practice, you have to practice by letting go. You can't practice by trying to control things. When this wisdom arises, it will arise on its own cause and its own conditions. It's not something that you can control. So don't stress about it. Don't make your meditation practice something that actually causes you suffering. Just steadily progress. You charitable giving, you keep morality, you develop your meditation. Just keep constantly doing these things, and one day this wisdom will arise, and you'll be able to see the Dhamma clearly. This is just something you can't control. Like when it arises, it arises. You can't tell it to arise. You can't make it arise. So when it's time to sit down and practice, just sit down and practice. When it's time to sit down and do your chanting, just do it. If your mind's not in a good state, do it. If your mind's in a bad state, if your mind's in a good state, do it. If your mind's in a bad state, still do it. Don't worry if you sit down and things aren't calm. Like, what you have to do is just keep practicing, keep constantly going, and eventually the mind will reach a state where it doesn't fall back. So just steadily practice like this, and bit by bit, little by little, we will eventually see the Dhamma. Just like Ajahn did when the Buddha gave his first sermon. You'll see that everything arises and passes away. You'll see the Dhamma that the Buddha taught, and you'll see the Dhamma that the Buddha taught. You'll see that over 2,500 years ago, that this teaching that the Buddha taught, this is real, and the enlightenment that he was talking about, this is a real thing. And you'll know for sure that a Buddha arose in the world, and he taught, and he passed away 2,500 years ago. All these things will give you a firm sense of knowledge and a firm sense of faith. Ajahn Chah actually said to me one day, wasn't the Buddha born in Thailand? And for me at that point in time, I was very confused. I didn't know what to make of it. I thought it over in my mind. It's like, no, the Buddha was born in India. I was quite sure of that. But at that point in time, I didn't quite understand what he meant. But now I understand what he really means is the Buddha arises in the mind with each practitioner. So whether you're in India or whether you're in Thailand, if the Dhamma arises within the heart, that means the Buddha has arisen in that place. So this path that the Buddha's laid out, you follow it, just keep following it, and gradually your suffering will diminish. The more you do this and the more you practice, one day you'll get to the point where you break through and you see the Dhamma. And after you break through and you see the Dhamma, there'll only be at the least there'll be 7 more lives that you have to be born into. So with this, I wish you the very best in the Dhamma, and I wish you the very best in developing this wisdom that I was speaking about here tonight. So he's asking, would anyone like to ask some questions? So the question was, how do we develop the 4 Brahma Wiharas? So with developing the Brahma Wiharas, within the Brahma Wiharas we have Metta, which is loving kindness, Karuna, which is compassion, Mudita, which is sympathetic joy, and Upekkha, which is equanimity. Whichever one of these you feel most comfortable with, you develop that one. But for most people, what we should all really start with developing loving kindness. We should start with developing Metta. And the way you do this, you develop loving kindness for yourself. You think good things about yourself, and you start from yourself. May I be well, may I be happy. And then from that you moved on to someone you love, like say a family member or something like that. And then you move on to the people where you're neutral towards, and you develop those same kinds of thoughts. And then and lastly you develop those kinds of thoughts for people that you don't like. Because the thing is, if you try to start with people that you don't like from the very start, you haven't really got enough power to do that yet. Your mind isn't strong enough, and it won't actually really be able to feel genuine thoughts of loving kindness for that person. So start with yourself first and build up, keep building up enough of that strength of the mind. You can do things like walking around and repeating in your mind, Ahang Sukhito Homi, which means may I be well, may I be happy, and you can just keep repeating that over and over again in your mind and wishing those things for yourself. You do things, you can do little exercises like, just wake up in the morning and just make the determination. It's like, righto, today I'm not going to get angry with anyone. Today I'm not going I'm not going to abuse anyone. I'm not going to let my mind fall into those dark states. And the more you do this, the more you'll see the world through the eyes of kindness. You'll be able to really look on yourself and others with exactly the same kind of loving kindness. You really set yourself up and really try and watch all your different speech, your actions, and all the thoughts that come up in your mind. And the more you can do this, and the more you can watch these three different aspects with thoughts of loving kindness, your mind will quite easily become calm, because your mind's in a happy state already. And the happy state of mind will give rise to what we call piti, which is rapture. This will arise very, very easily because the mind is naturally happy already. And so when this rapture does arise, it's very, very hard for anger and ill will to arise. Just repeat the question. The question was, before the Buddha became enlightened, before he left home, did he actually know if Nibbana was real and if it actually existed? And if he didn't know, how did he know how did he know that he should go out and seek for that? So what you have to realize in the Buddha's cosmology, the beings go through many, many lives. So the being that will become our Buddha, he had built a lot of spiritual accumulations over many, many lives. He developed these, he practiced these a lot, and he developed them to the very fullest they could possibly be. And so he knew that this barami was already full. And he knew exactly that this would be his last life. He would be the supreme teacher among gods and men. He would be the foremost in the world. He knew all this before because he'd been building barami for so long and so many different lives. So even when he was born, when he came down out of one of the heaven realms, he had perfect mindfulness. He had perfect mindfulness when he went into the womb of his mother, and he had perfect mindfulness when he was born. He had perfect mindfulness in these three instances, and this is something that's impossible for like a normal being to have. But what you have to realize is maybe he didn't quite know that Nibbana existed or Nirvana existed, but what he knew is he had suffering within his life, and he knew that there had to be some sort of way out of the suffering that he experienced in his life. And so because he built so much barami over so many lifetimes, he knew this instinctively, that he knew that there had to be some sort of way out of suffering. He knew that everything in the world it's like everything in the world is in pairs. So just say if you have light, you have to have darkness. If you have heat, you have cold. So he investigated and he saw, okay, you have birth, and so you have to have death, and this is something that everyone can see. But he had enough wisdom there already to actually see, well, if there is a birth, there has to be a state of non-birth, and if there's a state of death, there has to be a state of non-dying, of the deathlessness. He saw this and he realized this, that there had to be this kind of state available there somewhere. So although he didn't know what the deathless state was at that point in time, he knew in his heart something had to be there, something bigger than him had to be there. He went out and he practiced under two very prominent teachers, and as I said before, he developed very, very deep states of meditation, very deep states of concentration. It brought him a lot of happiness, but he realized his suffering was still there. The suffering was still in the mind. So after that, he went and he practiced. So at that time, he had a lot of happiness in the mind. So after that, he realized he still wasn't free from suffering, so he went out and he practiced very austere practices, didn't eat food, tortured his body a lot. Then after a while, he realized that, well, I still have suffering. At that point, he realized, okay, I've had so much happiness, but I've also had I've had the extreme happiness, but I've also had the extreme suffering. There must be a middle way. And that's when he sat down that night and he firmly concentrated his mind, and wisdom arose in his mind that the middle way was the way. And for the first one to actually see when this arises, this is what we call the perfectly enlightened Buddha. There'll only be one of these, because that being is the first one to realize that. And so he has to build barami for a very, very long time. But there will be only one. that answer your question? So the question was, there's a chant in Buddhism, is I don't know the proper word for it, but it's Pahung. We call it Pahung in Thai. It's the Buddha's victory over Mara. What the question was does this being that's actually the Mara, does it exist? Is it a person or is it a state of mind? What actually is this Mara? And if we do meet this, how do we overcome it? Okay, so this Mara that we're talking about, this is actually a being that actually exists. This being is in a very, very high, very, very refined realm, in one of the highest heaven realm, above all the different kinds of heaven realms. This is right up the top there. So this being is actually a Devata, and this being has developed a lot of parami before. They've developed a lot of morality, and actually that being has the aspiration to one day become a Buddha. But what actually happens is this being, it in a way, he sort of draws his power for people that are stuck in the central realm. So people that are stuck here, when they follow these things and they don't practice the Dhamma, it's like it gathers a sort of power. So what happened when the Buddha was about to become enlightened? This being came down and tried to stop the Buddha becoming enlightened, and tried to it, because he was worried that when the Buddha becomes enlightened, he'll teach beings, and beings will be released from suffering, and they'll be released from this central realm that he's sort of the Lord over. So this might seem sort of petty for a being that's in a very, very high realm, but what you have to realize, they still have a sense of self. They still have, maybe like if you're still not enlightened, you still have wrong view in some way. So the way you can stop these sort of beings, taking control of you and taking control of your own mind, is you can just, develop loving kindness and spread metta to all the devatas and all the beings in other realms, and this will help stop him trying to control you. I hope I translated that right, because if I didn't, I'm in trouble. So the question was, why do we find it that when we're, say we're at home or whatever, and we're just in our normal house, why is it harder to motivate ourselves to practice? But when we come to somewhere like here, and we come and meet a teacher like Ajahn or whatever, doing meditation is really easy, and our mind seems to get into a calmer state of mind. So what's the difference between home and somewhere like a monastery or somewhere like a center like this? Why is there a different feeling between the two? So what you have to realize, that when we go home, when we go back to our regular house, we have to realize that we bring along a lot of mental baggage there. We go home, we're used to everything in our own house. We go home, we got the kids running around, we got all these different things we need to do. There's, we think about work, all these different, it's like we're so used to the place, we're so used to normal emotions running around while we're there. So that's why it is a lot harder to put all these things down while you're in that environment. But you'll notice when you come to somewhere like a monastery, or you come to somewhere here like Bodhikusuma, everyone here is here with the same intention. Everyone here is here to practice. Everyone here is intent on the Buddha's teachings. All these it builds this good energy. So all those things that we usually carry around with us about the kids, and we're worried that the TV might break or whatever, we put all those things down for this point in time that we're here, because maybe we've travelled here, so we've really sort of set ourselves up, so right, we're going here and we're going to meditate. So you've really set your mind up in a good state already. And also when you get here, there might be good teachers. The monks might be helping you, lead you in meditation. So there are all these different things where it really culminates to you letting go of all the garbage that you usually bring along with you. So, but what you have to do is, there's times that you spend in places like this, you have to take this as your inspiration. You have to really sort of go, okay, I've built that up already, so I'm going to take that inspiration home. And what you need to do when you get home, probably the best thing to do is, if you can set aside a little place in your house somewhere, like a little room, that you could, use that as your meditation room and your chanting room. And that room, that's just a room you go into to meditate and to do your chanting or whatever. So when you go into that room, you bow to the Buddha or whatever, and you really start to set your mind up. Maybe you think over the times that you were in the monastery or that you came to Bodhikusuma and you listened to Ajahn Anan and you did all these different things, and really set your mind up in that way and do some chanting. Think of the Buddha, you reflect of the qualities of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And so if you really set your mind up while you're at home, the same results will arise. The same results will arise as if you were at a monastery. And when we do have the chance to go to a monastery, whatever chances we do get, take those chances, because these are the things that give us inspiration to keep practicing at home.